My name is Frank Callahan, and the night my own son told me there was no room for me in my own house anymore, I already knew something he didn't. I was standing on my own porch, rain coming down hard, a bag in my hand, and behind me, through the window, I could see my wife and my son sitting at the kitchen table, already talking like I was gone. 3 days before that night, I got a phone call, one phone call. And it changed everything I thought I knew about my own life. But I didn't say a word about it. Not that night. Not for weeks. Because before I show you what I was holding on to, I need you to see exactly what they were about to throw away. Stay with me. This one's worth the full watch. If you know what it feels like to be counted out by the people who should have believed in you, first hit subscribe right now, because you're going to want to see how this ends. Before the rain, before that phone call, before any of it, you need to know who I was first. I grew up above a hardware store. My dad, Robert Callahan, opened it in 1968 with a small loan and a lot of guts. I slept in a room above the paint counter until I was 19 years old. That smell, paint, wood, oil, it's still the smell of home to me. My dad taught me 2 things, and he taught them to me over and over until I never forgot them. First, a man's word matters more than his money. Second, and this one used to annoy me when I was young Frank, don't go around telling people what you're worth. Let them find out on their own, or don't let them find out at all. I didn't understand that second one until I was almost 50 years old. I took over the store when my dad's knees gave out. I married my wife, Diane, in 1994. We had a son, Tyler, in 1999. Over the years, I grew that one small store into 3 stores across the county. Nothing huge, but honest, real. People trusted me. Contractors bought their tools from me instead of driving 40 minutes to the big chain store. By my own standards, I was doing well. Here's the part I never told anyone, not even Diane. Not the full story. Back in 2003, I was fixing a broken tool in my shop, a torque wrench that kept slipping and could hurt somebody's hand. I worked on it after hours for months until I fixed the problem for good. I wasn't trying to invent anything. I just didn't want anyone getting hurt in my store. An old friend of my father's, a lawyer named Walt Higgins, helped me file a patent on the fix, just as a favor. A few years later, a real tool company up in Cleveland licensed it from me. Small deal. Quiet deal. A few $1,000s a year at first. I never told Diane the real number. Partly because of my dad's voice in my head. Partly because, honestly, it embarrassed me a little, like I hadn't really earned it. So I let Walt manage the money quietly, in a trust, and every year a check went in that I never touched. That one quiet decision to stay humble instead of loud is the reason my family still has a roof today. But we'll get there. Tyler was smart, smarter than me, and I never once resented that I was proud of it. He went to college for business. While I was still writing inventory lists by hand, my son was talking about growth and scaling like it was a language I hadn't learned. In 2023, Tyler came to me with an idea, a new kind of smart tool connected to an app, something contractors could use to track their work. He called it Fast Torque. He had a partner, a smooth-talking guy named Preston Adair he'd met at a business event. Tyler wanted me to help fund it. "Dad," he said, sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open, "you've built something great the old way. I love that about you. But this is the future. I need money to get started, and I need your name behind it. People trust the Callahan name." I'll be honest, something in me hesitated. I'd built my whole life around things I could hold in my hands. This felt like smoke. But he was my son, and there's a kind of pride that makes a father ignore his own gut, just to watch his boy build something even bigger than he did. I put in $400,000. Not from the trust, I still hadn't touched a cent of that. I took a loan against one of my stores and pulled from 30 years of savings. Diane loved the idea. "Our son, the businessman," she used to say at church. For about a year it looked real. Tyler had an office. His picture was in the local paper. There was even a headline, "Local Son Reinvents an Old Trade." I was so proud I almost told him about the patent trust. Almost told him his own father had quietly done something similar, years before. I'm glad now that I didn't. The first sign something was wrong came in March. I stopped by Tyler's office to drop something off, and the front desk was empty. Not out for lunch empty. Dusty keyboard, "Nobody's worked here in weeks" empty. I asked Tyler about it. He laughed it off. "We went remote, Dad. Cuts costs. It's smart business." I believed him. That's the thing about trusting your own son. You make excuses for him before he ever has to lie to you. By summer, Fast Torque missed a payment to one of my own suppliers, a bill Tyler asked me to cover just for now, tax reasons. I paid it without asking too many questions. $12,000. Then, a few months later, another one. Then a call from my bank about a payment I never approved, $41,000, sent to an account under Preston Adair's name. I called Preston directly. No answer. I called again the next day. The number was disconnected. I sat my son down in the driveway that night, both of us standing in the cold, because I didn't want his mother to hear this yet. "Tyler, where's Preston? Where's the money?" He wouldn't look me in the eye. "It's complicated, Dad. There were expenses. Preston handled that side of things. I trusted him. You trusted him with my money. It's just cash flow, Dad. It'll all balance out once the next round of funding comes in." There was no next round of funding. There was no company left at all. Over the next 2 months, staying up until 2 in the morning going through bank statements myself, I learned that Preston Adair had been quietly pulling money out through fake bills for almost a year, and my son, whether he was too trusting or too careless, I honestly still don't know which one hurts worse, had signed off on every single one of them. By fall, Fast Torque was gone. And so, almost, was my hardware store. Let me lay it out plain, because nobody warns you that losing everything shows up as numbers on paper before it ever feels real. $400,000, gone. The loan against one store, Called in, I lost that store by winter because I couldn't keep up 2 loans at once, plus the house loan I'd also used to help Tyler make payroll one bad month. 2 of my 3 stores gone by spring, sold off cheap to a company that buys up failing businesses, because once the bank calls your loan, you don't get to negotiate. You just sign. I stood in my empty flagship store, the one my father built, the one I slept above as a boy on the day the shelves were finally stripped bare, and I put my hand flat on the counter where my mother used to run the register. For the first time since I was maybe 9 years old, I cried standing up in that building. Here's the part that still gets me. Diane didn't ask how I was doing. She asked how this happened to us, like it was a storm that hit us, instead of a choice our son made and I trusted too easily. Word travels fast in a small town. The paper that once ran Tyler's photo ran a much smaller story a few months later about my store closing. Customers who'd bought from me for 20 years started going to the big chain instead. Diane stopped going to church for a while. I understood why. Pride only survives on its reputation, and ours had just been gutted. By the time the rain came the night I told you about at the start, I'd already used the last of my retirement savings, just trying to keep our house one more month. It wasn't enough. The bank sent a notice 3 days before Christmas, 90 days to fix it or lose the house my father helped me buy back in 1995. I still hadn't touched the patent trust, even then, even with the house on the line. My father's voice was still in my head. Don't let them find out the hard way, or don't let them find out at all. I think, somewhere under all that grief, I was still protecting one last thing. Not the money, the one part of myself that Tyler's mistakes hadn't touched yet. Diane and I had been married 30 years. I'm not telling you this to make her sound like a villain. She was scared, and scared people say things they can't take back. It was a cold Tuesday night in late December. I'd just come from a meeting with my bankruptcy lawyer, who gently told me there was probably no way around it now. Diane was sitting at the kitchen table with Tyler. They both stopped talking the second I walked in, the way people do when you already know you were the topic. "We need to talk," Diane said. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. That should have told me something. It didn't, not yet. "Frank," Diane said, and I remember noticing she almost never called me by my full name. "I think you need to move out for a while, just until things settle down." I asked her what she meant by that. "The house is in trouble because of choices you made," she said. "Not choices we made. Not choices Tyler's business partner made. Choices I made. I have to protect what's left for Tyler's sake. He doesn't need the whole town watching his father lose the family store. And Tyler, my son, the one I'd put $400,000 and 30 years of trust into, finally looked up and said, 'Dad, honestly, you're just not much use right now. You lost the stores. You almost lost the house. Maybe you should just go stay somewhere else. There's no room for a man like you here anymore. There's no room for a man like you here anymore.'" I stood in my own kitchen, the kitchen where I taught that boy to ride a bike, right outside that window, and I understood, in one long, cold second, that they'd already decided this before I ever walked through the door. This wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I went upstairs, packed one bag, and walked out into the rain with nowhere to go. If you've ever been made to feel small by people who were supposed to love you the most, drop a comment below, because you already know exactly what this feels like, and I promise you, this story is for you. That's the porch. That's the moment from the beginning. That's where I was standing when I already knew something they didn't. 3 days before that night in the rain, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Frank Callahan? This is Walt Higgins, your father's old lawyer. I suppose I'm still your lawyer too, even after all these years. Walt was 81 years old, and sharper than most men half his age. He'd handled my father's affairs. He'd filed my patent quietly, years back, as a favor, and he'd managed the trust ever since without ever once asking me why I never touched it. Frank, he said, the tool company that licensed your invention is being bought by a much bigger company. While they were going through the paperwork, they found our old deal. They want to buy your patent outright before the sale closes. I've had it checked by people who know what these things are worth. Frank, they're offering $2,300,000. And they need your answer by the end of the month. I sat in my truck, engine off, rain starting on the windshield, and I laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind that comes out of a man who just found out, the same week he's about to lose his house, that he's quietly worth a fortune and never told a soul. Walt, I said, does anyone else know about this? Not from me, he said. Your father made me promise that, Frank, years ago. He said, let my son decide when the world gets to know what he's worth. I sat there a long moment. I thought about my wife, telling my son it was time to protect what's left. I thought about Tyler telling me there was no room for a man like me. And right there in that parking lot, I made a decision that would take me nearly 2 months to carry out. Don't tell them anything, I told Walt. Not Diane, not Tyler. Just move quietly. Get the money into the trust. And give me some time. What are you going to do with $2,300,000, Frank? I'm going to buy back everything they think they took from me, I said. And I'm going to do it so quietly, they won't see it coming until it's already done. For 6 weeks, I stayed above a friend's garage on the other side of town. His name was Kurt Rossi, a man who'd bought tools from me for 25 years and never asked me a single question, just handed me a key and said, stay as long as you need. Remember that kind of loyalty. It's going to matter later. While Diane believed I was somewhere licking my wounds, and Tyler believed his father had simply given up, I was on the phone every morning with Walt, and later with a sharp woman named Priya Anand, an expert Walt brought in, who specializes in tracking down money that's gone missing. First, the house. Through Walt's office, I paid off the rest of our house loan in full, quietly, before the 90-day deadline ever ran out. Diane and Tyler had no idea it was already handled. As far as they knew, we were still one step from losing the house. I let them believe that a little longer than I probably should have. I'm not proud of it. I'm also not going to pretend it didn't feel like justice. Second, my hardware store. The company that bought my stores for pennies hadn't done anything with the building yet. Through a small company Walt's office set up in my name, I made them an offer well above what they'd paid. They took it in less than 2 weeks. They never knew or cared that the buyer was the original owner. Third, and this took the longest and mattered the most, Priya spent 5 weeks tracing every dollar, every payment out of Fast Torque, every fake bill from Adair Consulting, every account my son had access to. What she found wasn't just bad judgment. Preston Adair had been stealing since month 4. Almost $210,000 moved out through fake work that was never done, split between an account Preston controlled, and this was the part that hit me hardest, even though some part of me already suspected it, a second account with Tyler's name on it. $40,000 my son had quietly pulled out for himself while the company was already failing, to cover his own debts, including a car his mother didn't even know he was leasing. My son hadn't just lost the money through bad judgment. He'd taken some of it for himself on the way down and let his own father believe it was just bad luck. That was the hardest evening of the whole 6 weeks. Harder than the porch. Because the porch came from fear and shame. This came from something colder. I asked Diane and Tyler to meet me at the store. I didn't say why. I think Diane assumed I wanted one last look before it changed hands for good. They walked through the same front door I'd walked through as a boy, and stopped. The shelves were full again. The Callahan hardware sign was back up, freshly painted, hanging right where my father first put it up in 1968. Frank, how is this? Diane started. I set 2 folders on the counter, the same counter my mother used to run the register on. The first folder held the deed to our house paid off in full, weeks before that foreclosure deadline ever hit. The second folder held Priya's full report, every payment, every fake bill. Preston Adair's arrest already filed with the county. I'd handed everything to the authorities 2 weeks earlier, and right beside it, laid out in plain black and white, the $40,000 with Tyler's name on it. I watched my son's face go pale. $2,300,000, I said, as quiet as I could make it. That's what a broken tool I fixed in the back room 20 years ago turned out to be worth. I never told either of you, because my father told me not to talk about what a man's worth until the world needs to know it. I think the world needed to know it about 3 weeks after I got told there was no room for a man like me. Diane was crying by then. Tyler couldn't say a word. I bought the house back, I said. It's yours, it's ours, free and clear. I bought this store back too, and it's staying in the family, the way my father meant it to. And Tyler, I looked at my son for a long moment. I'm not turning you in over the $40,000. Preston's going to prison either way, and he belongs there. But you and I are going to sit down, just us. And you're going to tell me the truth about what you did and why. And then, starting Monday, you're going to work the floor of this store, same pay as any new hire, and learn this business from the ground up with your hands until you remember what it means to earn something instead of borrow it from someone who trusted you. I won't tell you it was easy after that. Diane and I are still finding our way back to each other. Trust, once you watch it get handed away that easily, takes a long time to rebuild, longer than any loan. Tyler's been on that floor for 4 months now. Last week he restocked the paint aisle without being asked. Small thing. It meant more than he knows. Preston Adair is waiting for his trial. Callahan Hardware is back to 2 stores, with a 3rd one starting in the spring, funded the way my father would have wanted. Slow, honest, paid for in full. They stood on that porch and told me there was no room in this family for a man like me. What they didn't understand is that I'd spent 30 years building rooms for people, a store for my father's memory, a house for my wife, a future for my son, quietly, one honest piece at a time, long before anyone ever thought to ask what I was really worth. Turns out, I already knew the answer. I just never saw the need to say it out loud until they needed to hear it. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. I read every single one. See you in the next story.